You're listening to The American Dream with Jay McNally on WAAM Talk 1600.
On the line with us is a very good friend of mine and a well-known figure here in Ann Arbor, especially to WAAM listeners. That's Rob Steele, who has been a cardiologist for 30 years and a former candidate for Congress against John Dingell. He ran a valiant campaign, and now he is running for University of Michigan Regent. So, Rob, tell us, 1, 2, 3, what is your expectation for change and reform at the University of Michigan when you get elected?
Well, first, people need to understand that the Board of Regents at the University of Michigan, according to the state constitution, is the governing body of the university. It's not the legislature. It's not the governor. It is the taxpayers and voters of Michigan who elect these positions on the general ballot in November. So I look at it as a grassroots position, one that's been underappreciated, and one where people need to be paying more attention. The fact that people haven't paid attention, well, I can say our friends on the Democrat side pay attention. I mean, it's been controlled by the unions pretty much as you look at some of their votes and how they're put on the ballot. But I think the key thing in my campaign for the University of Michigan region is based on three very simple facts. Fact number one is that Michigan taxpayers have supported the university for over 150 years. This venture capital, so-called, was used very wisely by the administration and the alumni, and a $7.8 billion endowment was created, and that's the second largest of any public university. So that's number one. Number two is that Michigan lost more residents under 40 last decade than any other state, and it was also the only state that actually shrunk in size. And then number three is 40% of all the undergraduates at the university are from out of state. And so my basic program takes the position that the university just must do more to provide a better return on investment to the taxpayers of Michigan in the areas of admissions, the education, and the use of endowment by helping keep Michigan talent in Michigan.
Michigan. Now, one of the problems that we are seeing, it is becoming an acute problem, is that even valedictorians at some of the best schools in Michigan are not being admitted to U of M, and it seems to be completely inexplicable why they're not getting in. How could you change that? Or a new policy?
Well, so in the undergraduate level, it's 40% are out of state. At the overall level, 56% of the total university are from out of state. But graduate schools should have more out-of-state students. But it is true that many of our highly qualified students are not accepted to the university, and the problem is these people are so highly qualified, when they don't get into the University of Michigan, they don't stay in the state of Michigan to go somewhere else. They leave the state, and they go off to some other school, oftentimes never to return. So we
there's
need
a real brain drain taking place.
Exactly, and that's what's killing us. So we need this priority of admission for our most highly qualified students. At the same time, we absolutely still want to recruit the very best out-of-state students into our state to see how fantastic the state of Michigan is. And then we want to entice them to stay here. So, number one, we want to admit them. Number two, once we have them here, we want to entice them to stay. And I would propose a tuition refund program utilizing the endowment distributions to give tuition credits for graduates with the so-called STEM degrees after they stay in the state for 5 years, and then over the next number of years they can recoup their tuition.
And U of M could easily afford that.
They've recently reduced the amount of distribution they put out to 4.3% of the capital every year, and last year they had a 24.8 increase appreciation. So, there's no question that you have to watch the endowment very carefully. You want to use it wisely. You want to make sure the corpus continues to grow, and there's a major capital campaign getting ready to start, and I would propose that some of the new funds that we go out and recruit would be put into restricted funds to specifically, I would think that some of the big engineering companies would love to donate money, which will then go into a fund that will help recruit engineers, for example. So we want to get them in, then we want to keep them here. Another thing we want to do to help keep their costs down and to help make sure they can get through school and not have massive debt is one real creative one that I've suggested, which is students who go during the spring and summer terms and use those credits to actually graduate early and go out and join the workforce, they should get those credits accumulated during the spring and summer at half price. This will help get the students out sooner. It will help them get out with less debt, and it will help us, of course, use the physical plant of the university better, because much of the physical plant is woefully underutilized during the spring and summer, and then of course it will also increase revenue. I mean, it does everything we want. It increases revenue, it reduces our cost per fixed capital, and it gets our students out sooner and with less debt. And then the other thing on the whole financing end is that I would suggest that we use the endowment, the corpus of the endowment, as the bank, as the source of principal for the loans, not out of the endowment distributions, but the endowment has to invest in something. And I would suggest that the university should feel there is no more conservative investment than to invest in their own students. If they believe in the education they provide to their students, it should be the most conservative investment available. So this will help align the interests of the university with the student. It will say to them, we are investing in you. We believe you are going to get a degree on time. You are going to go out with your degree, and you are going to earn an income that will pay our endowment back, and we're willing to stand behind it. And I think that's just an absolutely critical thing.
Yeah. Now, I've heard you give your talk many times to different groups. Rob and I have both been on sort of a circuit to conservative groups all over the state. I was promoting healthcare reform, and you, of course, have been running for Regent. It's amazing the energy that you've been able to generate by your general presentation about all of this. Your highest qualifications, of course, are that, number one, you graduated with honors from the medical school at age 23?
Yeah, that's right. And, my family has a tremendous history at the university with over a dozen degrees, and 5 of those over 50 years ago. So we have great institutional memory, and I would love to serve the university. And I might say parenthetically that the earliest graduate in our family from the university was actually my grandmother, and that was in the early 1920s. And, of course, that wasn't very common back then, and her degree was actually in education. And she went on to serve the university and do all sorts of things. And you have
some others who, some of the men in your family played football, one of them under Fielding Yost?
Yes, that's correct, and he went on to a great career in public education, and my father had a 40-year volunteer career in public education, started a community college. And, one last thing that I frequently talk about is actually the education they receive. And one of the keys is, for example, I went to the university for undergraduate as well. And when you go there in undergraduate, you have a distribution requirement, of course, and part of that is 4 years of study of foreign language, and I think that's absolutely fine. But I would also propose that we have 1 year of study of what I'll call the language of America and freedom, which would include a study of the founding documents from the source documents, including the Declaration, Constitution, Federalist, and Anti-Federalist papers, and then also study of the role free markets and free enterprise that played in the so-called 5,000-year leap. And study of this system that has lifted more people out of poverty around the world than any system yet devised. And I think our students don't understand this, and they need to understand it if we're going to maintain a civil, educated society.
Okay, Rob, so we have about a little less than 2 weeks before the election. Those who want to do two things. One, who want to contribute to your campaign financially, they go to your website, Rob Steele for U of M Regent?
Yeah, the website is Dr. Rob Steele for Regent.com. But, frankly, if you Google anywhere Dr. Rob Steele and Regent, you're going to come up with something.
You're going to find
at this point, or the congressional race. But Dr. Rob Steele for Regent. I use Facebook at Dr. Rob Steele and Twitter at Rob Steele MD. But everything I send out on Twitter goes to my Facebook. And I send out a lot of great articles, not only on education, but also on health care.